Just be well-rounded person. Don't focus only on coding or analytics, but really know what's going on with the business and integrate yourself with the business more, so you can really communicate better, understand their business needs, and then try to solve business problems with data.
Hey nerds, Monica here. Welcome to the Data Podcast for Nerds, where we get to talk to amazing professionals and ask them all about how they're using data to solve the world's problems. We're highlighting all the tips, tricks, and nerdy fun bits to make you the best data professional you can be. Today with us, we have Atanas Bosakov. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Monica. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to have you on the show. So, we typically start off our episodes by understanding people's origin stories. So, if you could please tell us about your background and how you got to where you are today in your career.
Yes, definitely. Actually, it was a really interesting journey because my background usually has nothing to do with analytics or quantitative fields, mathematics, none of it. And in fact, I didn't get my personal computer until I was, I think, 21 years old. Never owned a computer in my life. Prior to that, of course, I've played um, video games and whatnot, but yeah, never on my own computer, wasn't interested. And it wasn't until I actually started attending college here in the United States that I started taking some math and stats classes, and that really got me into the quantitative field. And then from there was mostly my education that pushed me towards analytics and data science. Namely, I start taking economics classes. That was my major, and was heavy on quantitative analysis, using data to answer questions. And so I really liked it. All of a sudden, math started making sense to me, and statistics and whatnot. I saw the real world implications and how you can use it. And from there, I was really sold on the idea that I want to be in the field of data analytics, and made it my career.
That's awesome. So, you mentioned that you used to play video games growing up, and I'm curious what type of video games. Did it kind of have an influence on data and math and stuff?
Not in a sense, not directly, but I think playing video games really get you into this mode of solving something, getting to the next level, or solving a problem. So kind of learned from that to see, okay, you're the next level of difficulty, and instead of giving up and getting on the next game, you try to do better. So from that standpoint, yes, I guess there was some benefit. But yeah, I played mostly for fun with friends and with my brother.
Yeah. What was your favorite video game?
So there was a really old one, the tanks. I don't know if you remember that game where you go and kind of destroy little bricks and things like that. So that was one of the games. I forgot what's called in English, but because I grew up in Bulgaria, but yeah, we called it the tanks, and that was one of my favorite games to play with my
Okay. That
brother.
makes sense. It sounds very strategic.
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of. So, when you decided to get into data and analytics, what started your career? Where did you end up?
Really, my career started while taking classes. Literally, I started doing some research, more quantitative work, using data to answer questions, and I learned how to code while I was taking econometrics classes. And from there, I really found my first full-time job. It was in Petaluma, California, hired to be the junior analyst for a company called Hydrofarm. And I was so excited because that was literally my first full time job as an analyst. So
That's very
that
exciting.
was the beginning. That was the beginning of it all. Yes.
Amazing. What was the first programming language that you learned?
So it's called Stata. It's actually for econometrics and statistics. So that was the first, and then shortly after that, I picked up R, and mostly because data you have to pay for a license, and having the econometric skills and the statistics skills, and you really want to start using your skills at work, and instead of convincing the company to kind of invest in a tool, you can start using free and open source tools to showcase, and go from there. So that's why I transitioned from Stata to R.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What are your favorite problems that you like to solve using data and analytics?
All kinds of problems. It's not that I have a favorite problem, it's just the methodology using really statistics and analytics to answer any business problems. That's really the gist of it. And I always try to keep in mind what we're trying to solve for. What is the business objective, right? Not just doing data for the sake of the analytics, but really to answer practical questions. That's why I always try to be as practical as possible, although you have to do the technical stuff on the back end, but really to translate that into the business language. What does it mean for the business? So it's not that I have favorite problems to solve, but I really enjoy really anything related to statistics, time series, and also sentiment analysis. Anything related to that is kind of really something that excites me the most, I guess.
Yeah, sentiment analysis is a really good use case. Do you have any um, particularly fun projects that you worked on recently using sentiment analysis?
Wasn't actually a recent project, but what I like about the project that I'm going to mention to you since you asked is that we were able to squeeze so much out of it. So we had a survey data, and in addition to the quantitative answers they gave, we had to get average score. From there, we were able to actually run analysis. We were testing hypothesis whether or not people who answered below or above the average were two distinct groups, statistically speaking. And from there, we also uh, took that next level to perform sentiment analysis based on the open-ended questions they answered. So literally from one survey, we looked at the data any way, shape, or form we could to squeeze the most out of it. So sentiment analysis was involved, hypothesis testing, all, and then we visualized the results. It was really interesting because we were able to put it all together in a nice visualization, but to kind of have the sentiment score as well as how based on the qualitative answers and link it to the numeric answers that they provided, kind of to see if there is a correlation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Survey data is so hard to get, specifically if the um with the open-ended
Mhm.
questions, because a lot of folks, at least in my experience when I'm trying to collect surveys, they tend to not fill in those sections unless they're required. And if they are required, then there's very short answers. So do you have any thoughts around how to capture really meaningful data within those surveys like that?
Well, this is actually in part what we did. We looked at people who decided to answer the open-ended questions and to see if their average score was statistically different than the average score of the people who decided not to, the respondents who did not answer the open-ended questions. So the
Okay.
hypothesis was, all right, so maybe people who are more likely to answer have some more constructive or negative feedback to provide, and that was captured by the sentiment analysis. And then we're trying to correlate that to, is that actually that group of people, is their average score statistically really lower than the score of people who did not respond to the open-ended questions. And it just so happened that yes, they were two distinct groups. So the
Amazing.
based on the score at least. So yeah.
Wow.
So that was exciting project because again, statistics was involved, sentiment analysis, data visualization, and kind of testing a hypothesis there.
Mm, yeah. Interesting. Are there any other unique data sets like surveys that you really like to dig into?
Not necessarily unique data sets, but what I really enjoy is actually combining various data sources, and it's kind of necessity, right, to go through the data wrangling and data preparation steps. So when you get different data sources and how you either join or union them together, how you merge the data sets, this is kind of something that I really enjoy. But you need to have kind the right tools and to know what this final data set should look like to
Mm.
be analytics ready. So I'm kind of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, and having the tools to execute is something that I think really fits into my not day to day, but something that I do often for work. And again, going back to solving problems, you get different data sets thrown at you. And what I like about Audit is that we get to touch different data sets, different data sources. That makes it very interesting, challenging at times, but yeah, it keeps you sharp.
Yes, it definitely does keep you sharp. So it seems like you're really into data cleaning. I love data cleaning.
I look at it, okay, we have a problem to solve, and that's going to yield really good analytics results. Let's get to it. Let's get
Yes.
that heavy lifting behind us. And I kind of enjoy doing it, knowing that that's going to really get us where we need to be with the data set.
That's a good way to look at
Yeah.
it. So, you already touched a little bit on tools, and I think this is a really good segue into our official fun bit section. So, you mentioned that you had your very own philosophy on open source tools. So, previously, you mentioned a little bit about moving towards learning more R. And I know that you've also given presentations on other open source tools that you find very useful. So, let's talk about your philosophy on open source tools.
Yeah. So I'm a big advocate for open source tools, and there's a practical reason why. So I really think it's helpful for a professional really to learn a set of tools. However, being flexible and agile really helps overall to sharpen skills. But also at more practical level, I can take the tools with me. So let's say I go with a company that does not have Alteryx, for instance. I can bring my own free and open source tools, and really, as long as IT permits to download the tools, I can literally be operational day one with that company and start showing some value. And that's what I really like about it. And second point that is very important about free and open source tools, you're not really locked into a contract. There are no licensing costs associated with it. Not only that helps from a budget perspective, but also, again, going to that practical aspect, if I need to transition a workflow, for instance, to a colleague, all they need to do is literally take my work. So it makes it reproducible, and you can collaborate on projects without having to acquire additional license for that person. So super practical, and open source tools are just as good in most cases, not in all. And I definitely see a need for proprietary data analytics tools as well. And my best approach is hybrid. Can we take free and open source and integrate within the system of tools, the set of tools that we already have? And that's why when I evaluate tools, to me is very important. Do they integrate with the data sources? Do they integrate with the existing tools? And if yes, what do we need to do to actually implement?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the integration part is one of the most important things to consider, because you don't want to kind of shut yourself off from the entire rest of the company, right? You want to be able to collaborate with everyone across the board.
Exactly, exactly. And you nailed it. Integration is very important, and showing that free and open source tools integrate well for the most part with the existing infrastructure is really a great way to show value and to really help the company reach the next level of maturity, analytics maturity, without having to invest heavily into tools that perhaps might not be the right fit. Also, that may what makes open source also another great alternative is that you can quickly go through the iteration process to test as a proof of concept. And if it's not working, man, obviously it's not working. But other than investing your time, you haven't really wasted any money doing so.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. So maybe you would use that open source tool to create your proof of concept and then share that with the business. And if there was some other tool that maybe the company was more locked into, then you would migrate that concept and build it on the tool of choice for the company.
Yes, or even make the case for a proprietary tool. Let's say a company does not have a workflow tool, you can bring free and open source. And if they're not really into free and open source for whatever reason, they can see the value of just the process, the methodology behind it, and why such tool can be a good fit based on the use cases, and then perhaps invest. But if they're open to adopt free and open source tools, that's even better.
Yeah. So, what tools have you used? You already mentioned R.
Yes, are another tool that I really like is Nime, which is kind of competitor alternative to Outrix, and I absolutely love Nime. I like Outrix as well. I used to work using Outrix, but when I transitioned to my current job, the company did not have a workflow tool, and I decided it's the best time to actually start exploring Nime, and I absolutely loved it. So ever since I transitioned to Nime, I don't see a reason to go back to Outrix, for instance.
Mm,
And what I like about Nime again is that I can develop something, a workflow, and I can transition it to my colleagues without having to pay for any additional licenses. So that makes it just very, very helpful and useful tool. And Nime, I mean, Outrix also integrates with R and Python, for instance. Nime does as well. So having Nime and R integrate and use them in one workflow is just very powerful combination.
yeah. Does it integrate with other tools within the company as well? If you had any CRM or any.
Yeah, so we can connect to our data sources. For that, we actually use a proprietary SAP connector that we pay for, but that's how we connect to our data, SAP data. And from there, we go through the data wrangling, analytics, and in most cases, we export to Tableau server. So Nime has an export node to output directly publish the data sources, the hyperfiles to Tableau server. And this way we can achieve end-to-end automation.
Amazing.
Yes.
So that's your go-to open source tool for the workflow. Did you mention, we previously talked a bit, did you mention that there's also an open source dashboarding? So you can replace Tableau?
Yes. And I don't think is necessarily ready for prime time yet based on my testing, but it's a very promising tool called Metabase. And I'm a big fan. I've been exploring Metabase kind of on my own just to see what Metabase is capable of. And following the company, they've been developing and improving the dashboarding tool a lot. From version to version, I see great improvements. So I'm really hopeful, very bullish on this company. And yeah, you can actually self-host. You can use it for free, or you can pay for the enterprise version. So really cool company.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
So, when you're trying to integrate these open source tools within a company, what kinds of hoops do you have to go through to make sure that everyone's comfortable? And of course, making sure that these tools have the right security to make the company and its data safe.
Yeah, very important question. You really want to make sure that you go through the right channels and also obtain all the approvals needed. And if the company does not have the necessary check and balances, I really urge people to create that structure, because you don't want anyone coming back to you and asking, well, did you do this, did you do that? So yeah, work with legal, work with your infosec team, just to make sure that they go through all vetting necessary to approve the tools, because you don't want to start using the tools and then someone comes back to you and starts questioning. And if they do, you can show that you've done all the review and you've obtained all the approvals needed. So it's definitely doable. This is what I had to go through with at least few of the companies I've worked for, but it's worth it.
Yeah. What um what would you say is a lot of pushback you get when trying to implement these types of open source tools?
Mostly is trying to convince people that you need the tool. So for instance, if I want to implement NIME as a workflow tool, usually people will ask, well, we have Power BI, why don't you use Power BI? And then you have to make the case that this actually serves slightly different purpose than what Power BI does, and kind of explain it. And that's why it's always great to have something to showcase as a proof of concept, to say, well, this is how we can be more efficient, whether it's data cleansing or data preparation or the actual analytics, achieving end-to-end automation, really to explain what's the problem that this tool solves and how it
Yeah.
fits. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like you need to do some work beforehand before you go make that case and understand really what the tool does, what it doesn't do, maybe make some kind of proof of concept type project so that you can present what it's capable of.
At least that's what my experience is. Yes.
Okay.
I'm sure other people with other companies perhaps may have slightly different experience trying to implement such tools, but that's probably the biggest hurdle I've encountered, trying to explain really what's the need for the tool to begin with. Because once you do that, then taking care of all the security aspect to show that it's secure and it's safe to use, it's easier, I think, than making that initial case to even trigger that process, the review process.
Have you noticed a specific thing that always makes people's eyes light up, like the aha moments of when you're sharing specific tools to kind of get them to say yes?
Yeah, usually is that use case when you show what the tool is capable of doing and people are on board with it and are supportive. But you need to show that you've done the work, your due diligence, to say, I'm familiar with the tool, this is the use case, this is how we can start using it for our objectives in our company, and this is why I think this is a good addition to our arsenal of tools. So, and then usually people are very receptive of the idea.
Are there any other open source tools that you have your eye on or you've been playing around with?
So I mentioned NIME, R. These are kind of the main ones that I've been using. Metabase, I'm exploring as of now, although I'm not using it at work or in production or anything like that. Just playing with it. But Yeah, for work, this is what I use as far as open source, but at home, I try to do everything open source. So I don't use any Microsoft products. I run Linux. I use only Office, which is alternative to Microsoft Office. So yeah, at home, I'm pretty much all open source.
Okay. Okay. What types of projects are you working on at home?
I try to stay busy and also to make sure that I keep current with all the trends in analytics. So that's kind of extra time for me to stay educated. So running everything in Linux kind of forces you to try open source and be around people who really support open source projects, and that helps me a lot.
So, what is your approach to learning new tools? Like, how do you find these new tools? And when you get a hold of them, how do you learn about them so it is to your advantage?
Yeah, so it all started going back to the beginning of my career. When I really struggle to accomplish something, I start researching, is there a tool that can help me be more efficient with analytics, data visualization, and whatnot? So from there, when I find a tool or let's say an example of a dashboard, then I'll start learning dashboards, right? Tableau is a great example. I discovered Tableau and started learning Tableau. And from there, just being surrounded by people who are knowledgeable about data analytics, you pick up tools here and there, following the community leaders, and being a part of several groups really helps. But also doing your own research to see what tools are out there that I can that perhaps I'm not familiar with. Maybe there's something that I'm missing that's out there, and asking questions. Just be humble and asking questions, seeing how other professionals are doing it, and try to see if I can pick up anything additional that I might be missing. And yeah, YouTube, great way to learn. I also recommend being part of groups on LinkedIn, and also I'm a big fan of EDX. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the platform. You can find just amazing content and courses that are usually free, and you just pay extra for the certificate. If you complete the course, you can just pay for the certificate, which is very small cost.
What particular LinkedIn groups do you find the most beneficial?
Oh, I gotta go back. I follow so many, but they're usually analytics and open source groups. And also another resource, it's called Noster. And for open source is just great. The community that I follow on Noster, they're great in terms of open source. I've learned so much from that community in the last probably 6 7 months that it's just insane.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
those that are unfamiliar with Nostr, what is it?
So Noster is actually a protocol, and people build different social media apps on top of it, and it's just great alternative to traditional social media because you have more control over your content. So it's decentralized, and is just great way to really be in charge of your content. And the community is just amazing. It's still growing. It's infancy still, I think, although it's been around for, I'm not sure, 3 or 4 years now. But yeah, it's a great protocol, and people, just the development on top of that protocol has been very impressive.
Are there any other recommendations that you have for folks that are looking into getting into the data and analytics field?
Yes, it's a great career. That's my recommendation. But you need to be really willing to work hard. It requires not only technical skills but also soft skills, because if you don't know how to present your analytics findings, or if you don't understand the business needs you're trying to solve for, you're not going to be very successful. And also you need to really promote your work, because as data analysts we often do the heavy lifting, we do the work, and for instance, management just sees a dashboard, right? But what it took to do the data profiling, data identification, data cleansing, the analytics, putting it all together, working with everybody, gathering requirements, development, testing, putting it into production. So it's not that you need to overwhelm people with technical terms, but definitely to kind of promote your work and to tell them also how you use the tools and to show the return on investment, even if they're free tools, right? It takes time to implement the tool. So you can say, and by the way, for this project, this is how we use the tool, and perhaps we would not have been able to do that if that tool wasn't implemented on time. So that's my recommendation. Just be well-rounded person. Don't focus only on coding or analytics, but really know what's going on with the business and integrate yourself with the business more, so you can really communicate better, understand their business needs, and then try to solve business problems with data.
Amazing. I have another question for you. You mentioned about promoting yourself and showing all of that work that happens on the back end for you, just building that dashboard. How exactly would you recommend showcasing or promoting that work?
That's a very challenging question, and it's gonna really depend on the environment you're in, the technical expertise of your leadership and executives. So I recommend really being smart, knowing your audience, and just give them enough information without overwhelming them with technical terms, but find a way to communicate and to really bring data analytics and the tools into the conversation enough so you can actually show value of everything you're doing as an analyst. It's a challenge to find that balance. Very challenging. Yeah.
It certainly is.
So my recommendation will be know your audience. Yeah. If you're talking to more technical people, definitely have the liberty to throw some more technical terms. But if you're talking to people who are not as familiar with either some of the tools or the processes or statistics, don't try to just sound smart and overwhelm them, but find other ways to really say, well, remember the tool we implemented. By the way, we use this tool for this project or for this audit, and that was very fundamental for our success. So sometimes that's enough and sparks interest, and usually more questions follow after that.
Do you have any other final recommendations or words of encouragement for the listeners out there?
Be on the lookout for more tools out there, and especially in our line of work, it's a ever-changing landscape. So that's why I recommend, even if you know a tool, if you're really good with a tool, try to learn something in addition to that, and it's going to really help in your career development. Knowing more tools, variety of tools, just showing that you're a constant learner and you are really set for success with different tools, languages, whatnot, as opposed to just sticking to what you've learned so far. And know the business. Just remember why we're doing analytics.
I love that. Know why we're doing the analytics.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Atanas, for coming on the show with us. If any of the audience members have any questions for you, where can they find and or follow you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn and on Noster. On Noster, my handle is Greeky. It's like geeky, but with R. So yeah, if any of you out there watching this podcast and you're on Noster, or if you're not, I strongly recommend getting an account and follow me there. I post more on Noster than on LinkedIn, so that's a great way to follow me.
Well, thank you again. And as always, folks, happy learning. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Data Podcast for Nerds. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, if you want to transition your career and become a data professional, follow me on LinkedIn for even more tips, tricks, and nerdy fun bits.